My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Well, we want to get back to our study of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and the resurrection. You know, Paul said, when the mortal shall put on immortality and the corruptible shall put on incorruptibility, then shall be brought to pass the saying, death is swallowed up in victory. Now, virtually all scholars that I'm aware of, don't know anybody that differs with it, agrees that Paul, in 1 Corinthians 15, 55 and 56, or 54 through 56, quotes from Isaiah 25 and Hosea chapter 13. He likewise is clearly drawing from Daniel chapter 12. Now, as I shared with you about the fulfillment of prophecy, Paul is more than emphatic. He says it over and over and over again, that his eschatological hope was nothing but the hope of Israel found in Moses and the law. Let me take just a moment here to delineate for you one of the problems of traditional eschatology. In both the amillennial and in the postmillennial world, it is often denied that biblical eschatology is related to the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel. In numerous formal debates, I have asked my opponents, are your eschatological hopes based upon and taken from God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel? Repeatedly, they have said to me in written form, so there's no denying what they say, they have said no. Some have said, well, my eschatological hope is the hope of Adam and Abraham. And thus they create a dichotomy, a division between the hope of Adam and the hope of Abraham. Some say, well, my hope is Abrahamic and Davidic. Okay, so you create a division between Adam, Abraham, David, and the hope of Israel. Folks, that is an unbelievably bad position to take. And yet it was the position of Joel McDermott when I debated him. It was the position of John Welch in Indianapolis when I debated him. It was the position of Mac Deaver, amillennialist, when I debated him. It was the position of Dr. David Hester, who had just debated back in June of 2017. When we say, we actually, write on paper, no, my eschatological hope is not based upon and taken from God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel, we are implicitly saying, and yet very powerfully saying, I have a different hope from Paul, from Peter, from James, and from John. Let me illustrate that very quickly. When Paul was on trial, Acts 24, 13 and following, Paul said, this I confess to you, that after the way they call a sect, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things that are written in the law and the prophets, that there is about to be resurrection of the just and of the unjust. Where did Paul say that he got his doctrine of the resurrection? From the law and the prophets. In Acts 26, 6 and following, Acts 26, 21 and following, he reiterated that his hope was from Moses, the law, and the prophets. Now watch this. Peter said he was anticipating the coming of Jesus, whom the heavens must receive, he said, until the time of the restoration of all things. And concerning that restoration of all things, he said, all of the prophets from Samuel, from Moses, yea, all who have ever spoken, spoke of his these days. Where did Peter get his doctrine of the coming of the Lord and the restoration of all things? From Moses, Samuel, and all the prophets. Those are the Old Covenant prophets of Israel. Peter, when he spoke of the salvation to come at the day of the Lord, said in 1 Peter chapter 1, 10 and following, concerning this salvation, The prophets have inquired and searched diligently to know the times and the seasons, to know the time and the manner of the things which they had foretold, to whom it was revealed that not to themselves did they minister to those things. Do you catch the power of what he's saying? He's talking about the Old Covenant prophets who were told that the things that they foretold were not for their day. Look at Daniel chapter 12, 9 and following, for instance. Daniel was told, Daniel, seal the book. It's not for your day. John was told that in the sounding of the seventh trumpet, the mystery of God foretold by the prophets would be fulfilled. Where did John get his doctrine of the last days, the judgment, the resurrection, the coming of the Lord? Well, everyone understands, virtually everyone, that the book of Revelation is absolutely saturated with citations from what? Moses, the law, and the prophets. Do you catch the power of this? Let me reiterate. When someone says their doctrine of the resurrection, the judgment, the coming of the Lord, is not based upon and is not taken from God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel, Israel after the flesh, they are implicitly admitting that they preach a different gospel from what Paul and Peter and John, all of the New Testament writers, in fact, they're preaching a different gospel. And this is serious business. So when Paul says that the resurrection would be the fulfillment of Isaiah 25, Hosea 13, Daniel chapter 12, with Ezekiel 37 thrown in for good mixture, folks, we must bring our eschatological hope into alignment with that undeniable reality. And yet, unfortunately, we have so many people still denying this undeniable reality. We have more to say about this on the flip side, but it's so critical for us to lay the foundation for understanding the power of what Paul said when he says, when the mortal shall put on immortality, the corruptible shall put on incorruptibility, then will be brought to pass the saying, death is swallowed up in victory. This is the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel. Oh, but wait, does that mean that it's not the fulfillment of God's promise to Adam? No. Does it mean that it's not, therefore, the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham? No. And we'll show you that on the flip side. We'll see you there.